We can learn a lot about Game Freak's design philosophy over time by examining differences between the mainline Pokémon games. This is a retrospective on Pokémon FireRed and LeafGreen versions with an emphasis on what's different from Pokémon Red and Blue versions. But we're not just listing differences. I'm going to deep dive into the how and why, not simply the what, of how these games set themselves apart from previous games in the Pokémon franchise. That's extra fun to do with Pokémon FireRed and LeafGreen because we're not only comparing with the game design from the original Pokémon Red and Blue that these games remake, we're also comparing to Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, which were the most recent titles to release before these. The differences in content from Red and Blue and the differences in mechanics from Ruby and Sapphire are separate, fascinating domains that together make Pokémon FireRed and LeafGreen very interesting games to do a deep dive on. Hello, my name is Mothy, Jimothy for long, and I do retrospectives in a format that I call Playing Games As Intended, wherein I take special efforts to use every tool the developers give us for its intended purpose. For example, catching a ground-type Diglett that's made available right before Lieutenant Surge's Electric Gym, or in Johto, noticing that the powerful Sludge Bomb TM comes relatively early on and building the team to make sure we have a strong user for that. Sometimes playing the games in this way ends up being not harmonious and fun, and then I like to delve into why that might be. I take an extra close look at the problems the game asks us to solve, and I make an attempt to fit square pegs in square holes, so to speak. Yes, you can just catch a Snorlax and beat down Sabrina's gym with it, but I'm more interested in analyzing the newly available Dark and Bug-type moves to see if they've given us a specific best tool to punish her Psychic typing. The other secret ingredient in my runs is to try and hit all the game's content so that we can talk about it. This typically includes finishing every quest and interacting with every new system. That's really fun to do in games that are part of a series like Pokémon, because we really get to look close on how each game is different from the previous. For instance, every game since Gold and Silver, for some reason, has had a high-effort, low-reward quest where some NPC wants us to catch a bunch of a single species of Pokémon, and I'm waiting for the day that that quest isn't a total waste of our time. One thing I love to track from generation to generation are all of the in-game NPC trades, because these are Pokémon the game is basically endorsing and suggesting for us to use on the run. And after trending downward in quality since Yellow version, I was pleasantly surprised to see the NPC trades come back strong in FireRed and LeafGreen. Stay tuned. I also like to take an opinion on which version of the game is better, in air quotes. The real answer is whichever version you got as a gift or whichever you found in the used game store, but I look for micro-specific in-game reasons that one of them plays better than the other. I landed on Blue over Red because Porygon is cheaper at the game corner, Gold over Silver because the version exclusives on Route 46 had like 10% higher encounter rate, and Ruby over Sapphire because Emerald is a little more similar to Sapphire, thus playing Ruby alongside Emerald gives a more complete experience. I usually play coy and bury the lead, but this time I'll tell you outright, we're playing FireRed version. Venture a guess as to why at any point, and leave a comment if you're brave. The reveal is going to come pretty late on. Now, with the emphasis this video is going to put on comparing FireRed and LeafGreen versions to Red and Blue, we've got to look back and remind ourselves what exactly my gripes were with the first generation games, so we can check if things got better. I do have an excellent Gen 1 retrospective you may want to watch before this video if you could use a refresher. The biggest problem I had was just type imbalance, a lot of which can be ascribed to accident or inexperience on the part of the developers. But not all of it. Psychic type did feel busted on purpose. Electric, Ice, Psychic, and Ground types shone above all others due to the huge number of opponents they affected, as well as their power during the Elite Four. Other types, chiefly Bug and Fighting, were much worse than they should have been in the meta simply due to lack of good moves, or Pokemon to learn them. If you wanted Fighting, the one good option was Hitmonlee, and if you wanted Bug, a Leech-Lifing Parasect was sadly the best you could do. Red and Blue seemed balanced around having a Fighting type early on and a Bug type later on as a counter to Psychic, but we got Fighting access only in the late game, and usable Bug access, never. I also felt the need to run all the HMs on your team was a little restrictive given how few options you have for Fly, and how many sensible Pokemon that should have learned Cut were omitted from the list. Finally, difficulty was a little low, especially in the Elite Four, but they did already begin to address this in Yellow version, so it's not something I blame Red and Blue for. Enemies just only had moves they learned via level up in Red Blue, which combined with many species' barren level up learn sets made them pretty easy to hard counter. And last thing, a note about team composition. This needs a disclaimer. My goal never has been to steamroll the game. It's to build a balanced team with full HM coverage, make use of powerful TMs, especially those that come early on, and where possible to emphasize Pokemon who feel like content, who act as a vehicle for exploring other aspects of the game. You just gotta trust me that every Pokemon is on the team for a reason, even if that reason is silly. And thanks to my patrons and my Discord community who helped me with nicknames for the team. If you want in on future team names, you know where to look. So, let's get into a run of Pokemon FireRed. These Pokemon runs take a huge amount of work to put out, so if you end up enjoying the content, you can help me a lot by simply clicking the good buttons on this video to tell the computer I did a good job. Thank you so much, y'all. Let's play. We begin in Pallet Town for the third time out of 7 games in this series. Try to leave and Professor Oak stops us, brings us to his lab, and offers us our choice of starter Pokemon. I get a lot of flack for boxing my starters often on these runs, but I usually feel like the starter doesn't align with the stated goals of my run. That is not at all the case in FireRed. They give you tons of early TMs and tutor moves that can only be taught to a few Pokemon, but the starters tend to be among those. I feel they stretched logic a bit so that kids wouldn't get mad their starter can't learn the early TMs. Heck, they even idiot-proof Charmander with Steel Claw to take on Brock. And we do need a fly user, so I happily grabbed Keyboard the Charmander and took down the initial rival fight. Now, natures are a gigantic change from Gen 1, but they don't ultimately impact the run too much. Each Pokemon now has a nature that increases one of their stats slightly and decreases another, or it can be a wash. Without the separation of moves into physical versus special yet, all 3 starter Pokemon will be special attackers, so a nature that increases special attack is Clutch. Keyboard did luck into one of these. He's a quiet Keyboard, like a MacBook, not some Cherry MX hobbyist thing. We've got to run back and forth to Viridian City delivering a parcel for Oak, so I grabbed as many levels as my Ember PP could get me while we were forced into long grass anyway. This was a mistake on my part. In Gen 1, if you manage to beat your second rival fight on Route 22 without catching anything first, Professor Oak gives you 5 free Pokeballs, and to achieve that, you need your starter to be level 10 or so. But it turns out they changed that in Gen 3 so that Oak gives you the 5 free balls regardless upon delivering his parcel. So I had a pretty strong Keyboard solo my rivals Pidgey and Squirtle before ever hunting for more teammates. Pidgey does have Gust here, so the game is stacked slightly against Bulbasaur users in the beginning. Then, because my misplaced grinding got Keyboard to level 11, I couldn't attack anything without killing it, so I had to raw dog Pokeballs to catch a Rattata and Pidgey on Route 2. I don't plan to raise either of these, but FireRed, more than any other game so far, has important thresholds to hit for number of Pokemon caught. There's content we care about for catching 10, 30, 50, and 60 Pokemon, and we are going to keep up with those as we go rather than try and race 60 all at once in the endgame. You can think of Pidgey and Rattata as Pokemon numbers 29 and 30, if that makes any sense. Like, by the time the game checks for 30, we'll have 28 others, plus these 2. I bought a chunk of 10 Pokeballs afterward to replenish, and was dismayed to discover they do not give you a Premier Ball for ordering in bulk. FireRed knows about the exotic ball types, but they intentionally keep us to the regular, great, ultra, master hierarchy until the post-game, when some cracks show and they allow a few later-gen ball types to sneak in. That is representative of the game as a whole, and I'm not calling it a bad thing. There are 2 more generations of content in the Poke world now than when Red and Blue first came out. They clearly went to great lengths to hide most of the later-gen content from us until the post-game. Things like breeding, special Pokeballs, challenge battle facilities, and any Pokemon numbered above 150. We cannot even evolve a Golbat. So, when content or a mechanic from later generations does appear during the FireRed campaign, it feels like a special occasion. Steel-type Magnemites, held items, and double battles all slip in, but we'll get to all that as it comes. I caught a Mankey as our second actual team member, named Tim Socks. Kanto benefits greatly from having an early fighting type due to the prevalence of normal-type opponents. But a Mankey does way more than handle normals. With the expanded Gen 3 moveset available to him, Mankey is a downright menace from now all the way through the endgame. I boosted him to level 7 in Viridian Forest before Tim Socks was able to begin winning his own fights. I had him low-kicking Kakunas, thinking that move had a higher crit rate to bypass their Hardens. That was never true, I was thinking of Karate Chop. But I did learn that low kick now does more damage against heavier foes. That makes him extra good at taking down Brock's Onyx, but I don't bother evaluating low kick heavy damage beyond that, since the situations where it's good are a little piecemeal. They did carefully place an antidote on the ground immediately after this trainer with a bunch of Weedles, because they know you'll need one. Yellow version had gotten rid of Weedles in Viridian Forest, and carefully also removed antidotes because you had no reason to need them. It felt like an intentional change Yellow made to reduce the difficulty, so it's a little strange to me that they re-added them in FireRed, which otherwise seems intent on lowering the difficulty early on. Before we leave the forest, we have to grind for a 5% encounter Pikachu. Pikachu would make a pretty good early team member, honestly, considering the flying opponents early and water later, but Raichu is sadly destined to get traded away. Opponent levels get high in the postgame of FireRed, so I played this run from the beginning in a way that threw away as little XP as possible and decided against running the extra temporary teammate. This approach does end up making our team level much higher than the competition during the mid-game, but then we're back to being far behind by the end. Every single level we gain is just less grinding for that dang Elite Four postgame rematch. Once we make it to Pewter City, repels are for sale, so I grabbed several. My strategy on these runs is to beat every trainer battle, but I don't ever bother fighting wild encounters without a good reason to, hence I just chain repels in every wild area. Makes my footage a little nicer overall too. In the gym, Brock's subordinate trainer is actually kind of tough now. His Sandshrew is very sturdy, so Charmander teams are still a little disadvantaged here. Brock himself is quite a lot easier. One big Gen 3 difference was giving Charmander Metal Claw at level 13. What was once the hard mode starter because of this gym has now been made easy with the Steel type move, a rare glimpse of later gen mechanics with the Steel type sneaking in. It would have been a development nightmare to pretend the new type doesn't exist, but giving a Steel move to a low-level starter Pokemon is very different than simply tolerating Magnemites. This is a front and center, loud acceptance and integration of the Steel type into the Kanto main game. We can only pray they did equal justice to the other types. After Mankey low kicks down the heavyweight Onix to win, we're given the Rock Tomb TM. TM gifts in Gen 1 were often bad and or poorly chosen, but they did a much better job with gym prizes in FireRed, both with power level and with staying on theme for the gym. Rock Tomb was also given for beating the first gym in Hoenn, but it wasn't super strong there based on the meta. Here, it's crazy good, adding bug, fire, and flying coverage to Tim Socks. For what it's worth, Mankey is like the only reasonable species to learn this TM. The devs are low-key instructing you to run a Mankey. I visited the Pewter Science Museum just for fun and learned they no longer refer to the space shuttle by its real-world Columbia moniker. I thought Game Freak was steering the series away from referencing the real world because of changes like this, but there's actually a scientist in Silphco later who references a small Russian city, and the Pokédex descriptions for Ponyta mentions Ayers Rock, and Parasect mentions China, so we are still canonically playing in the real planet Earth world. On the way out of town, an aide to Professor Oak stops us to confer running shoes brought in from Gen 3. These are such a big quality of life improvement, and they make it so the bike's only purpose is basically just as permission to enter cycling road. Movement is a tiny bit sticky in FireRed like it has been since Gen 2, but it still feels much nicer to run around in these shoes than to ever touch the bicycle. It's especially nice in a game where you'll want the key item that you keep registered to the select button to either be the item finder or VS seeker for most of the run. Route 3 plays much the same as it did in Gen 1, with the difference that Tim Socks has super effective coverage on every opponent here, except for 2 poison types. It is unfortunate that Rock Tomb had to be the first TM we get, just because Brock is a rock trainer. Some weak ice move to let Squirtle cover flyers, or a bug type TM to reward people who raised Beedrill or Butterfree would have spread out some of the Mankey power here. Well, we have 3 catches to make before entering Mount Moon. Nidoran Male, Nidoran Male again, and Spearow, all destined for trades. But one of the 2 Nidorans needs to evolve, so take your pick of the 2, which we're going to raise up into a Nidorino that we must not evolve into Nidoking, nor raise past level 21 if we want our Nidoqueen to learn Body Slam. I welcomed Corn Soup to the team as a temp hire. It's also worth buying the exorbitant Magikarp in the Mountain Moon Poké Center as an effortless boost to our catch count. Mountain Moon looks much the same, but houses some subtle differences. For one, the Jesse and James content from Yellow is absent here, and from the rest of the game. We were far enough past Season 1 of the anime airing by the time this game released, I guess they didn't want to tie that in anymore. Here is where we start to encounter Steel types, starting with Super Nerd Joven's Magnemite. Mercifully, thanks to fighting already being encouraged to have on the team, we're covered against Steel, but these might be annoying to fight for Bulbasaur choosers who have not expanded their teams. I nabbed a Zubat for the heck of it for the dex count, then there are 2 interesting TMs here. TM09 Bullet Seed, which also came early in Ruby and Sapphire, isn't much of an upgrade over Vine Whip for Bulbasaur and Bellsprout. It's really only helpful for Paris or Oddish, giving a slight nod to FireRed in the version battle since Oddish is exclusive there. The other TM is 46 Thief, a Dark-type move and therefore an early Psychic-type counter. Offensively, there aren't many special attackers who can learn this at a level where it's helpful and aren't weak themselves to psychic attacks. It seems fine on Butterfree, but more interestingly, Thief fixes Abra. By giving it Thief, an Abra can actually attack before evolving. I never raise Pokemon that I can't evolve fully, but this would otherwise be a good reason for me to raise an Abra just to experience the difference in usefulness. Outside the mount, on Route 4, they took away the hidden Great Ball on the hill, but gave us 2 Black Belts who can tutor up Mega Punch and or Mega Kick. Mega Kick actually looks okay on a Pikachu, whose attack is greater than his special attack, but I slapped it on Tim Socks. Then we reach Cerulean City. Grab the rare candy hidden in this one yard. We are hungry for experience and levels this run, and every candy helps. I like to save these until just before the Elite Four when they're worth the most experience, but I'm not sure that's even mathematically logical due to the snowball effect of being more powerful early on. Has anyone done analysis on this? I tried going to the Berry Master's house to get a powder jar from him, but it turns out I can't prove my love for berries, having not yet collected any. Oops. So, continue to our third rival fight, who has by now evolved his Pidgey and caught Abra and Rattata. Against Abra, it's safe to waste time setting up, so I used Nidorino's iconic Focus Energy for the first time in my life, and the extra critical hits actually do help me kick through Squirtle's Withdraw. For winning, Rival gives us a Fame Checker. This is basically a Pokédex for important people that we meet. We can collect 6 lore entries about each of 16 characters by talking to NPCs and reading notes in the environment all game long. It's a fun added collection, but there's no reward for completing it, so I didn't fixate on doing so for this video. The Nugget Bridge is uneventful, but I still wish we had a poison counter. An early ground move is the one thing still missing from being able to counter every op in the early game. In the tall grass after the bridge, catch a Caterpie and Weedle at level 7 or 8, just for dex purposes. These bugs and their 2 evolutions make 6 pretty easy entries if we can boost them a couple of levels. I also catch an Abra for trading. Heading towards Cerulean Cape now, behind Camper Flint, we can grab TM43 Secret Power. This is sweet on Pidgeotto, but I think it's best for fixing Spearow, who otherwise drops off between Peck and Fly. Patching up weaknesses on weak Pokemon is exactly the kind of change these remakes should be doing, and they definitely did better with the TMs this time throughout the game. And hidden on the ground, I pick up a Bluckberry. There's a friendly couple in Misty's date spot who shame you for being single, which made me realize these games actually do that a lot. Multiple romantic couples each game love to rub it in your face. Pokemon's been on the leading edge of fixing Japan's population crisis for decades. Well, help Bill for his SS and ticket, then exit and re-enter to check his computer to preview Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon. No Umbreon or Espeon, they're still doing everything they can not to acknowledge the existence of Gen 2 Pokemon. Then, because we found that Bluckberry, the man now gives us the powder jar, but it turns out the berry mashing minigame is just a multiplayer thing I can't play, and I didn't need to bother. Oops. Let's do Misty's gym. I swap in my Caterpie against the subordinate trainers, getting it to a level 9 Metapod as we go into Misty. I swapped Metapod into Corn Soup, who focuses and kicks Staryu down for Metapod to ding 10, but Weedle still needs his levels. It clearly would have been better to try this during easier battles, but I got stubborn here and wanted to see if I could get Weedle some Starmie XP as a challenge. It was on a razor's edge, but we got it. The winning play ultimately required lowering her speed with a Rock Tomb from Tim Socks, Mega Kick had to land to get her Super Potion used, then Keyboard needed to land a Burn with Ember before a Revive Tim and heal him to Mega Kick the win with help from Burn Ticks. For my hard work there, I get a double evolution of Butterfree and Kakuna, making good progress toward that item finder threshold of 30 catches. Misty's prize TM, like Brock's, has been fixed. In Gen 1, we got the Water Gun TM in Mount Moon, which was immediately improved upon with Bubble Beam from Misty. Here, she gives Water Pulse. Better because we didn't just get a Water TM in Mount Moon, and it's also the best water move we'll get until Surf. Take down the Rocket Dig TM Thief, but hold on to this one for a little while. It's good on a lot of early Pokemon, but we want to stick it on a proper ground type for same type bonus. Then with access to Route 5, we can load up the party with a trip to Value City Furniture. Pick up Zigzagoon was tremendously valuable to run in a spare party slot during Ruby version, but Pickup got nerfed hard in Emerald. It's still pretty good in Fire Red though, occasionally offering Rare Candy, PP Up, and Hidden Power TMs, which is the only way to get that move. And it commonly scores berries to the point that I never needed to buy actual status healing items because I ran a whole fleet of Meowths in all my spare party slots. My community helped me name these guys Doughboy, Princess, and Nabby. I totally would have raised one for real and spammed Payday to buy TMs at the game corner early, except they actually lose pickup when they evolve into Persian, and I'm not playing with just Meowth all game. No, I'll admit I went a little too far with these guys, keeping all 30 with me as long as I could, even when that meant rotating the other 3 spots on my team, but it did make a little sense. Corn Soup we don't want to raise past level 21, and we'll add some other trade Pokemon that we can't raise past the obedience cap of 30, so rotating them out lost nothing, and let me keep Meowths active longer to find me a little bit extra loot. Speaking of trade Pokemon, in the upper underground entrance shack is our first trade of the game, our Nidoran male for a Nidoran female named Miss Nido. She came with a tiny mushroom, which is adorable, and actually helpful later on, so don't sell that. She's got a bold nature, which gives up attack for defense. Once in Vermilion, collect the VS Seeker in the Poké Center. Using this allows us to refight trainers, and the cooldown time is rather generous. Rematches are more in our control than they ever have been, allowing us to approach them and basically guarantee a rematch if we want one. Ruby and Sapphire made us run around and keep checking to see who would graciously permit us to fight them. To test it out, I went back up Route 6 and used the VS Seeker to boost Kakuna to level 10 and get Beedrill, but I don't touch it much more this run. We collect an old rod in Vermilion City, but sadly, fishing is still as awful as it was in Gen 1. The old rod can only catch Magikarps. Then there's a big gap in fishing rods before we get the super rod and good rod within like 30 minutes of each other, and also easily in the wrong order, which invalidates the good rod entirely. The one good thing they did with fishing is they kept the level ranges from hooked Pokemon more in line with yellow version over red and blue, where everything you hook with the old, good, or super rods was locked to level 5, 10, or 15 respectively. 15 is a little low for a wild Pokemon at that point in the game, and level 10 from the good rod that you get in Fuchsia City was just indefensible. The terrible pacing of the rods, even with improved level ranges, really dampens a lot of water species from consideration on your team. I am disappointed FireRed and LeafGreen did not bother fixing fishing, because all they had to do was move the good rod to Celadon City. Well, I trade Spearow to Alyssa for her Farfetch'd named Chiding. This thing comes with a stick, basically the required Farfetch'd item, and has a perfect adamant nature, trading special attack for attack. And with the boosted trade XP, this is definitely a good game to run Farfetch'd if you're ever going to. The fan club president yaps on and gives us a bike voucher and a restock on repels at the mart, but only just enough to get us to Lavender Town since plain old repels have a terrible price to duration ratio. A bad duratio. Now, my party level was already high enough to beat Lieutenant Surge, so I was a little dismayed to think how much higher it was going to climb doing Route 11 and the SS Anne before ever visiting the Vermilion Gym. Then I realized, what am I doing? I can just grab Mr. Mime and Nidoqueen right now and have some Pokemon who actually want that XP. So I headed through Diglett Tunnel, and be careful here. Arena Trap can be lethal if you run into Dug Trios, so I'd save your game first. On the far side, I send my Abra to Rayleigh for Mimien the Mr. Mime. This guy has no held item, but his timid nature trades attack for speed, which is not bad on the medium-fast Mime. You know I've been praying for a poison counter, and Mimien is just that, so welcome him to the team. Back through Diglett Tunnel and east through Route 11 now, where I avoided trainers on purpose until I could reach the guardhouse and trade Corn Soup for Turner's Nidorina, Nina. Her lonely nature gives up defense for attack, which is rather good on the sturdy Nidoqueen once I moonstone her. The war machine springs to life, opens up one eager eye. Welcome Nina to the team. She gets our saved Dig TM right away. With those two new additions, I'm happy to fight the Route 11 trainers now, using Nina to boost Mimien until he can contribute too. And Nina quickly hit level 22 to learn Body Slam. I noticed that Gen 3 changed this trainer type from gamblers to gamers, which is kind of lame, considering there's still a casino with slot machines in Celadon City. You're not hiding anything, Pokemon. Now, it's SS Anne time. In Gen 1, this was our source for the Body Slam TM, which was crazy powerful so early in the game. We did just build our own Body Slammer, but in place of the TM in Gen 3, we're given Brick Break, one of the best fighting moves and also quite powerful to be given so early. The rest of the ship is not dissimilar from Gen 1. The kitchen trash has berries this time, but the Great Ball is over here, visible on the floor. This is low-key a good change to make it so players don't feel the pressure to inspect every trash can all game long for items. Mimien hit level 22 to learn Magical Leaf, which is interesting coverage in theory as a grass-type move, but it's largely redundant with the Shockwave that we're going to teach him in a minute from Lieutenant Surge. The team is level 25 by the time we're fighting our rival, fighting for survival. Magical Leaf is helpful against his Wartortle, but we're so far above rival's level just by fighting available trainers and running 2 trade Pokemon that strategy was not important here. The captain hands us the Cut HM that I stick on a Meowth. May as well preserve the move slots of my team while I can. And with Cut, we can enter Lieutenant Surge's gym, which is trivially easy with a Digging Nina, but at least Lieutenant Surge's Pokemon have Quick Attack to get some damage in against our ground types if they choose to. With Surge done, go through Diglett Tunnel a 3rd time, that is the penalty of wanting a Mime early, and now we can cut the bushes down to get HM Flash from the Oak Aid on Route 2. We easily meet the 10 catch threshold, already having 24. Really, Item Finder at 30 catches is the first one that takes concerted effort to achieve. While we're here, I dip into the Pewter Museum back entrance for the old Amber, and this random employee tutors Seismic Toss onto keyboard just in case I need to carefully lower a wild Pokemon's HP without killing it. Then going through Mount Moon again is actually the easiest way back to Cerulean City, where I pick up the bike. Then keep that eastward momentum going and head out on Route 9. TM40 Aerial Ace is sitting in the open here, a 60 power flying move that actually goes crazy. It for sure helps out any poor souls running Butterfree, but it goes right on Tim's socks for our team, adding coverage for grass and fighting types to his already long list of coverage. And since it doesn't miss, I use it a surprising amount of times in the face of smokescreens and double teams throughout the run. Mankey once again failing to beat the overpowered allegations. One new feature I have not pointed out is there's gendered text color now. Females talk in red and males talk in blue with no neutral option. It's purely cosmetic and adds a little personality. I kinda like it. Higher pitched voices do feel more red than blue. There's an Oak Aid in the Rock Tunnel Poké Center gifting the Everstone for having 20 dex entries. I have never wanted one of these things, but the games love giving them out. What am I missing? Please tell me. Rock Tunnel is structured the same as in Gen 1, except there are smashable rocks in the basement. A little weird, given that we can't even break them until after the 7th badge. So, Aerial Ace was a recent huge power boost for Tim Socks, but he gets even stronger in Rock Tunnel. For one, he dings 28 to evolve into Primeape. Then, almost out the far end of the tunnel, stands a boy who casually tutors Rock Slide, a strict upgrade over Rock Tomb. It has always been a focus of my Pokemon runs to identify the disproportionately strong things the game offers us early on and build the team to take advantage. Gen 1 had that Body Slam TM, then Ice Beam and Rock Slide TMs in Celadon. Gen 2 had Headbutt in the Ilex Forest and the Elemental Punches for sale in Goldenrod. And in Ruby and Sapphire, Sludge Bomb TM and Thunderbolt TMs came surprisingly early. This time, Brick Break and Rock Slide stood out as the overpowered early moves. It's just a little unfortunate that I'm running them both on the same Pokemon. Pop out in Lavender Town, where we can now buy Great Balls and load up on Super Repel, which has a better duratio than even Max Repel. The team is level 28 to 30 right now, so we're really pushing the obedience cap. I've got to rush Erica to increase that cap, so I snuck by all the Route 8 trainers that I could skip. But I do stop in the grass to rustle up a Growlithe, just because, as a stone evolution, this is an easy 2-for-1 dex credit. Celadon City, as usual, has an explosion of content. This old woman gives tea as the key item for getting into Saffron City. Probably changed now that held items exist to prevent your friend from backdooring you some fresh water in Cerulean City to get you early Saffron access. Grab the Eevee from atop the mansion, then head to the department store. There aren't crazy TMs for sale, except Hyper Beam for a mere 7,500 gold, formerly a Game Corner prize at a cash equivalent of 110k. I buy several Evo Stones from floor 4, then up on the roof, the Thirsty Girl still accepts one of each drink. Her prizes are 3 utility TMs, though not the offensive bangers from Gen 1. We also gotta buy 1 lemonade for an endgame quest, and you know I sat here buying fresh waters for several minutes straight. The restaurant gives us the coin case, then I evolve Eevee and Growlithe for the dex credit, as well as Raichu for the eventual trade. I did consider both Arcanine and Flareon as my Psychic counter because they know Bite now, which has been changed to a Dark-type move. Both Pokemon have the stats to make it good, and Flareon can upgrade to Shadow Ball later. My friend who ran this game alongside me plays with similar philosophy but a different team. He ended up running Flareon as his Psychic tech and had a lot of success with that. Flareon is probably the best actual Psychic tech if I were to do this run again. But because I put a ton of work in my Gen 1 video cultivating a bug-type method to punish Sabrina, I myself fixated on a bug-type solution in FireRed just to check how the relationship between those two types has changed. More on that later. We can't forget why we rushed to Celadon City. We have to defeat Erica's gym, so Nina and Mimian will not disobey orders. The Grass-type Celadon gym is easy work for Keyboard, and we're actually staring down evolution level when he can learn Fly, so I'm okay pumping his level here above the rest of the team. It is a good reason to actually use Ethers for once, and I defeat Erica with Keyboard at almost level 34. For winning, we get the Giga Drain TM, which is a huge improvement over Mega Drain from Gen 1. Grass types overall are a lot more viable thanks just to Giga Drain, though they still don't have an abundance of super effective targets in the game. The meta is just not that friendly to grass types in Kanto. Let's grab a Fly while we're over here. There is a double battle on the way, one of only like 8 in the whole game, and one nice feature from later generations that they decided was safe in FireRed. But the double battles they brought into FireRed are closer to Ruby Sapphire style rather than the superior Emerald version double battles. Enemy teams only ever have 1 Pokemon apiece, and they're more designed to be cute pairings like a pair of Nidorans rather than ones that are actually effective battlers. Keyboard dings level 34 for Flamethrower here, we pick up Fly, and then I dip into Saffron to grab Psychic for Mimian, upsettingly early. Listen, With all the other balance tweaks they made in this game, leaving the Psychic TM just sitting here for the taking as early as your second badge is a clear message from the developers that they wanted Psychic type to be grossly overpowered. I personally would have pushed this later and instead given some mid-game support to Poison or Bug types. A Silver Wind TM would have been balanced and well-placed considering the looming Saffron gym. The way they pushed Earthquake much later and made Thunderbolt and Ice Beam so hard to get, it's a tacit acceptance of Psychic type's overpoweredness by leaving the Psychic TM where it is. Yes, I am licking a gift horse straight down the throat. Anyway, I cleaned up the Route 8 trainers before I forgot, which was enough to put Keyboard at level 36 to evolve into Charizard. This let me teach him Fly and then stop using him in combat. Gotcha. We are soft retiring our starter, but we've got to keep him around to fly us places for a little while yet. It's not quite time to attach our keyboard to the computer via USB. We'll string him along a bit, like if you break up with somebody but still rely on them to drive you to appointments. Returning to the game corner, I grabbed all of the hidden floor coins and begged innocent gamblers for more free ones. Look at these people, not a cell phone in sight, just living in the moment. The game corner offers the big 3 elemental TMs as prizes, but I never enjoyed the gambling, so I consider them to just have a cash price of 80k apiece. A dedicated player could grab them now via gambling, but I'll just return once I'm richer. For now, it's down into the Rocket Game Corner dungeon. All that's worth reporting is the glut of coughings in here now all have Levitate, granting immunity to Ground type, which was one of their 2 weaknesses. Ground type was very strong in Gen 1 thanks to the prevalence of poisoned opponents, but Levitate taking Coughings and Ghastlies off the menu for ground users made it one of the weaker types now. It is cool to me how the meta changed just by adding abilities without even needing to change opponent rosters. We did regress on gender inclusivity within Team Rocket. Grunts came in female flavor in the Gen 2 games, but we're back to only having dudes in Team Rocket. This was a weird thing not to retrofit because it would not have changed the gameplay at all. Then, as we pick up black glasses, I finally get to talk about held items. Those are obviously a big mechanical difference since the last time that we played the Kanto campaign. Whereas Generations 2 and 3 trickle the good held items out to us the whole game long, FireRed seems to be unsure if we deserve them, so they wait until the second half of the game to begin giving us held items. I'm not sure if they thought the mechanic was too complicated for the early game or what, but it's like they just remembered held items exist and only now do we start receiving any. Just weird they started with the dark type held item, unless these were intended to help out a biting Arcanine against Sabrina. I guess they actually probably were. Our first Giovanni boss fight is down here, super easy with our team 2 to 7 levels above his, and we get the Sylph Scope for winning, which unlocks the Pokemon Tower content over in Lavender Town. One intangible, super obvious change about FireRed over Red, Blue, Yellow is the updated graphics and sounds. I mostly avoid talking about technical differences like this in my videos because that's just a natural consequence of developing on newer hardware, except it's worth pointing out how the more advanced graphics and sound chip of the Game Boy Advance make much of the game less anxious. Lavender Town is nowhere near as weird as it was with green grass, and the music is less eerie now with more instrument channels filling out the theme music. Less was more here, and I think something of value was lost in modernizing Lavender Town. Inside the Pokemon Tower, Rival Fight 5 finds us quickly. This fight is entirely too easy after beating Giovanni to the point I don't even bother taking out Tim's socks against Kadabra. Algo sasses me about my Pokédex progress afterwards, but his taunts are actually way less applicable than ever since I'm truly making an effort to catch a bunch of Pokemon to hit those aid gift thresholds. FireRed, better than any other game, sweeps you up in that gotta catch 'em all mindset, offering actual gameplay reasons to do so beyond the simple pride and accomplishment. And it's not like we have to fill the Pokédex. I like that they reward you for catching a good deal of Pokemon without needing so many that we're forced to make rare catches or grind evolutions. They did hit a perfect balance. To that end, I do catch a random Ghastly in here just to alleviate our responsibility in the Safari Zone a bit later. Mimian Magical Leafs down the Ghost Marowak, then after sending a few Team Rocket grunts home, we reach Mr. Fuji, who teleports us out to his home and grants us the Poké Flute, unlocking the rest of the world. Let's start by heading down Route 12 now. The woman upstairs in the Fishing Pier Gatehouse offers us Return, upgraded from Swift. Then, after a few easy trainers, it's time to burst down the Snorlax, which Tim Socks does in a single, non-critical cross chop. Get him out of here. We're in the perfect location to dip into the Route 11 Gatehouse, again, now with 32 in the dex, to receive Item Finder from the Oak Aid, and we use that right away on Snorlax's former spot for a Leftovers. Yeah, after edging held items for half the game, Leftovers is the third one we pick up. Listen, I get it if they were trying to reserve particularly strong held items for later on, but I still would have tossed the player like Quick Claw and Bright Powder early on before hard launching held items like this. Snorlax gone means we get the Super Rod, which opens up a lot of team options, most notably Jinx, who is still absolutely cracked in this game and unquestionably the best ice type. But I have sunk cost to Mimian, so we're going to see how he fares on Psychic Duty. Plus, our ice type is spoken for. Then good news! After operating with the same 4 powerful Pokemon for a while, down to 3 since we retired Keyboard, it's time to expand the team once again. I'm on the hunt for an Oddish, which, yes, we could have caught earlier, but saving that catch for now was worth a bit of extra XP. With physical and special moves not being split apart yet, the big power level differences in Pokemon from Gen 1 to now are either going to come from changes to their learn sets or from newly added abilities. I built Oddish into the team for this video because its new ability Chlorophyll, which doubles speed while the sun is shining brightly, felt like one of the largest single power increases to any Pokemon granted by now having an ability. Oddish has the bulk to tank hits while setting up a sunny day, then the power to one-shot its enemies on the immediate crackback, especially through Solar Beam's natural synergy with Sunny Day, making it take 1 turn to fire. Thing is, Oddish's coverage is quite narrow if we only consider grass attacks, and there aren't any other special attack using moves that it can be taught. Any except Hidden Power, which by now we've gotten a copy of through Meowth's pickup ability. So I did take my time here hunting for a strong Oddish to add to the team. I sought one either with a perfect modest nature, or one with a strong and helpful type on its hidden power. I would be happiest with Fire, Dark, or Ice. I did end up catching one with a perfect nature, and got to diagnosing its hidden power. Against other Oddishes, the damage was neutral, which rules out a lot of types that it could be already. Then I tested neutral against Ghastly, ruling out Dark, Poison, Ghost, and Bug. So I went up to Rock Tunnel and looked for a Geodude to test Steel. Not Steel, meaning this is a Dragon Power Oddish. We'll take it. Welcome a Wet Tomato to the team. I teach her Giga Drain right away and PP max it using PP ups that have been flowing in from the Meowth crew. She evolves into Gloom after a few trainer battles, and then it's down the long routes 13, 14, and 15 while I catch her up to the party. As in Gen 1, the whole team is so low on PP by the time that I reached Route 15, I had to bypass most of the trainers, barely limping into the Eastern Fuchsia Gatehouse. An Oakade in here will eventually confer our ultimate prize. The XP share is ours for registering 50 Pokemon in the Pokedex. We're currently at 34, so from this point on, I'll be carefully calculating every catch we make on our road to 50. In Fuchsia, grab the Good Rod, just for another chance to get mad at fishing being bad. Then, for the first time in the entire franchise, I played the Safari Zone how they actually intended to. I've never gone below like 25 Safari Balls just hunting for the one Pokemon I wanted to catch, but this time we need a whole lot of catches just for the sake of catching. I went in with a little menu of what I expected to capture. Venonat is a must for trading. Then Rhyhorn, Paris, Doduo, and Execute are all common in the grass. That's 5, but actually 6 because we can easily Leaf Stone the eggs. Then add Goldeen, Seeking, Poliwag, and Dratini from fishing for 10 total catches that we're hoping to make in the Safari Zone. Several other rarer Pokemon can show up too, so any of those that you get lucky enough to catch is one less you need off that menu of 10. All the terrestrial catches came pretty easily, and I did luck into a random extra Parasect, so I only need 3 of the fish. Goldeen, Seeking, and Dratini came easy enough, rounding out the 10 that I was counting on in the Safari Zone. Of course, we get the Surf and Strength HMs for finishing the contest, and the Sunny Day TM will be important for Tomato as soon as we also have Solar Beam. Our Safari catches aren't all destined for computer jail, though. One of our Safari Pokemon is actually joining the team. That Dratini I caught is named Cable, and she is why I crave the XP share so badly. So, Dragonair evolves into Dragonite at level 55, which was unusably late in Red, Blue, and Yellow. You were already past the Elite Four at that point. But not only is the Elite Four more difficult here, there's a sizable postgame extending enemy levels into the mid-70s. In my logic, the game itself lasting longer and reaching higher level opponents caused Dragonite to now be usable on one's team while it wasn't previously. So I took that as a meaningful generational difference and started raising a Dratini. Plus, it gives me a reason to care about the XP share, and there's a lot of synergy with a team full of Meowths who've been grabbing rare candies all game. I went ahead and taught Surf to Cable, but it will be a while until she's much help in combat. What I need most right now is to get that XP share. After a successful Safari, we're at 44 catches of 50 as I fight the second Snorlax. Catching him was not in the plan, but after 2 double kicks from Nina put him at 1 pixel of health, I tossed out a Great Ball just in case and ended up getting him in 1. That's 45. The Gatehouse aid on Route 16 gives an amulet coin for having 40 in the dex, which I'm more than happy to keep equipped on some team member all game long, since it's not like it's taking a slot from a better held item. There's no need to fixate on bringing your amulet coin holder into every fight, because like swimmers don't need their $100 doubled to 200, but burglars and ladies can hold a few $1,000s apiece, which is well worth making the effort to double up on. Now, more catches. I flew to Pallet Town next and super rod fished for a shelter, that's 46. Then I fished on Route 36 for 2 polywhirls, 47. I waterstoned one of them and my shelter, 48 and 49. Then I flew to Cerulean City and traded the other polywhirl to Dante for his Jinx named Zinx. This one holds mail, reminiscent of many of the Emerald version trades, and has a good mild nature, trading defense for more special attack. And she is catch number 50. So with 50 catches on the nose, it's back to Fuchsia's Gatehouse for the XP share, which is going to live pretty permanently on Cable, slowly bringing her up to a usable level while also slowing down the growth of the rest of my team, which has been far ahead of the content for a while now. Trade Pokemon do feel like they synergize with a Dragonite team thanks to their quick growth, letting me spend more XP on my Dragon. So, with Cable now siphoning XP, I go mop up the Route 15 trainers, and I couldn't resist VS secreting the ladies for an easy 8,000 extra gold. Then it's Cycling Road, solely for the XP. Cable began wanting to evolve as of level 30, which I awkwardly have to cancel out of every time because she can't hold XP share and Everstone at the same time. I want her to learn Outrage at level 50 as her Dratini, compared to 61 if she evolves naturally, because 61 is pushing the limits of what we'll even play to. Koga's gym, as before, is heavily Psychic type, more so than Poison, at least in the subordinate trainers. Cable is actually able to pick up some of the weaker ops at this level with Dragon Rage, but Mimian is my best Psychic solution for now since he does resist his own type. Koga himself is easy enough for Mime to Psychic through. After the win, we're permitted to surf, so I began by doing laps in the Fisherman's Pond, which is 100% Psyducks. Catching one at level 32 or higher means that only a single rare candy is needed to become Golduck, who can then get traded to Hayden in the Western Fuchsia Gate for the Lickitung Mark. This is one Pokemon that just wasn't good in Gen 1, and the devs decided that it's perfectly fine that way. He holds no item and has a relaxed nature that gives up speed for more defense, which at least feels reasonable. Mark was not winning speed contests anyway, so that's just better survivability. Now, as I clear both sea routes down to Cinnabar Island instead of heading to Saffron City, we've got to talk about Psychic type. It was the boogeyman in Red, Blue, Yellow. Not only was it one of the most powerful types, but it did not have an answer no matter how closely you looked. No chink in the armor, no thermal exhaust port. Its only weakness was bug, and there just weren't any usable bug moves in the game. Psychic imbalance was the single most egregious flaw in the Generation 1 games, so the most important question I wanted to answer with this video is, what have the remakes done about that? Now, I already mentioned Flareon and Arcanine as bite users, and I think those are probably the best options. Dark-type does balance Psychic. But we can call it a fixation. I forced a bug move to work as my Psychic answer in my Gen 1 video, so I specifically want to check what they've done to help bug type succeed against Psychics in FireRed. There are certainly a lot of bug type move changes, but almost none of them are practically useful. Rhydon and Goldeen get the bug move Megahorn now, which is kind of cool, at level 57. Nope. And that's if you keep them unevolved. Nidoking gets Megahorn at 43, but as a poison type himself, he's got his own Psychic weakness. Same story with anything Beedrill could do, and with Venomoth, who can at least get Silver Wind now. Jolteon's Pin Missile learn level has been brought down from the unusable 48 to only 36, so he is in the running. But Pin Missile is not particularly strong, and the accuracy is only 85. We can find a better move. Butterfree learning Silver Wind at level 47 is probably the second most reasonable option for a bug offense. She even gets same type bonus on it, but her attack stat is so low. But there is one final bug move user we can look at. The Psychic solution, at least in terms of punishing its bug weakness, involves a visit to the Sevii Islands and some wild overleveling before we ever set foot in Sabrina's gym. To reach the Sevii Islands, we've got to beat Blaine first, which is why we've come to Cinnabar Island. First, step into the Pokemon Mansion, which should be where we catch a Ponyta, but they've shuffled around the fire Pokemon in this game. Ponyta and Magmar, a LeafGreen exclusive, have been relocated to one island. Contrary to how I felt about Lavender Town, this dungeon feels better in Gen 3 based on the graphical improvements, more accurate. The extra color and details make it feel more like the ruined laboratory it is, where people actually used to work instead of some cave. The same Blizzard and Solar Beam TMs are present as in Gen 1, and completing the place gets us the secret key to go in and challenge Blaine. As always, we want to get the quiz questions wrong to fight the subordinate trainers for easy XP and cash. I found it interesting that they kept the exact same answer sheet to the quizzes as Gen 1. It's weird how lazy they were about this. Crystal version did change the radio station quiz answers from Gold and Silver. Blaine himself is an easy fight as always, and I'm even able to take out his first 2 Pokemon using Cable before Tim Socks and Nina have to handle the scary evolved ones. After winning, Bill shows up outside and offers to take us to the Sevii Islands straight away. Make sure to say no at first, because we'll be unable to access the PC for a while, and it's important to make sure that you're squared away. So, what? The Sevii Islands? This is a bunch of new content added in these remakes. There are 7 islands, lazily named 1 through 7, but really some of them are themselves archipelagos, and the whole zone is situated in the ocean a good ways south of Kanto. Now, the Sevii Islands suffer from what I think of internally as DLC Island Syndrome, where there's suddenly a new land accessible in your game world that nobody has ever mentioned before, but all of a sudden you can go and do adventures there. There are NPCs acting like everyone always knew about the Sevii Islands. Were we living under a rock? I don't know, it just drives me mad because it feels like gaslighting even though it's just lazy world design. The way the Sevii Islands play out is very Chalice Dungeon-y, if that phrasing makes any sense to you. It's side content not related to the main game, but that can help you power up for the main game, plus they're small and episodic and kind of a drag if you go through them all at once. We have access to the first 3 islands now, and I do recommend doing them as soon as they're available just because it's less monotonous than doing them all together in the post-game. 3 plus 4 is less than 7, if that makes sense. Mechanically, these islands serve as the repository of Pokemon and mechanics that they didn't want us to have access to in Kanto, but there are also a couple of short stories we get to play through that give our visit some structure. The plot begins on one island where a man, Celio, is trying to fix the island's broken internet. Bill asks us to bring a meteorite to a man on 2 Island who runs a game corner, just as a favor. But before that, I jog north on 1 island along the fiery path where Ponyta is catchable in the grass. I wish I could go cash this in for the seal trade back on Cinnabar, but we're actually stuck on the Seviis until we finish this little chapter. If we try to deliver the meteorite to the man on 2 Island, he's too worried about his daughter Lostelle to accept a rock at the moment, and we're forwarded to 3 Island to find her. Before we go there, though, 2 Island has one very exciting feature. A market stall sells fresh water in bulk, so I stock up on the game's best healing item. On 3 Island, bikers are terrorizing a woman on the beach, and one man inside this small cave is digging for gold and throwing away a fortune in feelings, but someday you'll pay. So, save the town from the entire biker gang by battling them one by one. Am I the only person who sometimes refers to a large, white, bald man as a cue ball, by the way, because of the Pokemon games? I don't know if they invented that phrase, but it's a really funny metaphor. With the gang handled, we're allowed to travel west into the Berry Forest, where a Hypno has Lostelle scared and stuck in place. Defeat the thing to rescue Lostelle, and we're teleported back to the game corner where her dad finally takes delivery of the meteorite, and coincidentally, of course, Celio finishes his maintenance on the island's internet, and we're finally free to come and go from Kanto mainland. We'll be back here soon. For now, let's go grab a bunch of Pokemon in the Cinnabar labs. Grab a Raichu out of computer jail and send it to Clifton for E-Sphere the Electrode. No item on this one and a hasty nature, giving up defense for more speed, which Electrode does not need help with. Send Venonat to Norma for Tangeni the Tangela. This one holds Stardust, a generous prize, but sassy nature cashing in speed for special defense is not great. Ponyta goes to Garrett for Sealor the Seal, which I thought was a stupid name until I remembered the Gen 1 seal trade was named Sailor, so it's actually a cute callback. It just doesn't make sense if it evolves now. Sealor holds no item, but bold nature giving up attack for defense adds more bulk at little cost and feels pretty good here. And those 3 were actually all the remaining trades, so let's take the time now to rank FireRed's NPC trade Pokemon in our traditional tier list. Miss Nido is quite strong early on if you get her Dig and Body Slam, but Ground has lost a lot of strength in this generation of games. You could say the same about Nina. Nina's nature is more helpful, but the difference isn't big enough to stick them in separate tiers. Note that these trades are for a Nidoran male and Nidorino in Leaf Green instead, but they have the same 2 natures as the females, and I don't think that I would rank them differently. Shading comes with the item he needs to succeed and a perfect nature. Farfetch'd does not have great stats, but this is as good as Farfetch'd can be. There aren't a ton of fly options in the game, and Aerial Ace and Secret Power give him a lot of early power, so he's certainly playable. I'm actually pretty high on Shading. Mimian is fine. I would have preferred a nature that increases special attack since he's so close, but just short of hitting many one-shots throughout the whole game. But he's strong early, he learns Thunderbolt, and he handles ghosts. some of the time. Zinx is completely busted and even has a special attack increasing nature. Modest would have been preferable to mild. The trait does come late, catching a Poliwhirl is not easy, and she holds a useless mail, but there's no pretending Zinx is not an extremely good trade Pokemon to run. I wanted to like Mark so bad, but he's just as bad as he ever was. He has an excellent TM learn set, including several HMs, and he could be a psychic counter this gen with Shadow Ball. But his attack stat is not good, and his bulk isn't enough to feel comfortable. Plus, he needs a Golduck or Slowbro in exchange, which are not easy to come by. Sealor is disappointing. He has some bulk, but if you run him as your ice type, it's really a shame his special attack won't be high enough to one-shot dragons. The right nature could have helped, but Sealor's just boosts defense. He is versatile, but with Ponyta scooted over to the Sevii Islands, making this trade becomes annoying. And it is awkward getting a new water type in a place where you already had to surf to. Did not even have the manners to come with an item. E-Sphere feels better here than the Electrode from Gen 1, but it's still awkward. Thunderbolt TMs are renewable, he can set up Rain Dance Thunders, and Static is a good ability. Shame then that his defense decreasing hasty nature is anti-synergistic with that, and Electrode doesn't benefit from gaining even more speed. The fact that he comes so late after you just tackled a bunch of water opponents keeps his utility low. Last but not least, Tangeni is interesting. Like Gloom, the ability Chlorophyll has made him a lot more powerful, but is it enough? His sassy nature increases special defense, which should help him out a lot, but it's so low to begin with, and the increases are percentage-based, so this feels like a waste. Giving him Calm nature at least, so it was his attack rather than speed decreasing would have been nice. You probably have spent your Giga Drain TM by this point, but he comes at a good time for Sunny Day and Solar Beam, and holds a Stardust as a peace offering. Because of how much fun I end up having with Chlorophyll Gloom, I'm willing to hear out Tangeni. Overall, the trades have not felt this good since we were back playing Yellow version. It feels like the devs chose natures carefully to complement the Pokemon's strengths in most cases, and the mix of held items from Mail to Stardust to nothing at all felt more genuine and fun. Mark needed to be offered in Lavender Town to be useful, and request something easier like a Growlithe in exchange, but I can at least see a reason any of the other trades might make sense to run on your team. Overall, a refreshing set after watching NPC trades get sadder and sadder every game since Yellow. I also cashed in my old Amber and Dome Fossil for Aerodactyl and Kabutops. Fossil Pokemon pop out at level 5 in this game, making them significantly tougher to integrate on your team. That's a shame because Kabutops was never good, but they made him a lot more viable here with Mudshot and Rock Slide if we tutor it. He's definitely on the list of Pokemon who got big improvements since Gen 1. Now, let me remind us, we only came to Cinnabar this early to build an extremely convoluted answer to Sabrina's Psychic Pokemon. We need 2 tiny mushrooms for our scheme. One of them came free on the Miss Nido trade ages ago, and I think there's another one hidden in the underground. But that Miracle Parasect I caught in the Safari Zone actually is holding a tiny mushroom for me, so I don't even have to backtrack. So, our next step is to evolve Sealor, but I'm waiting till level 41 for that so he can get Ice Beam. I take out a few of the trainers I bypassed on one island, then punk a Wild Tangela to reach level 41, learn Ice Beam, and evolve Sealor into Dugong. His offense is looking rough, considering this is my one ice type and therefore my Dragon Slayer. I'll just have to pray his bulk is enough to let him attack twice. So finally, take our Dugong, this does not work for Seal, to the Move Relearner on 2 Island, who in exchange for 2 tiny mushrooms will teach us Signal Beam, a bug-type move that is only available on freaking Dugong. Like it or not, Signal Beaming Dugong is peak psychic coverage in FireRed. The move is 75 power, 100 accuracy, with chance to confuse. It is rather good. Let's just pray it's enough. There is one other thing I want to touch on before leaving 2 Island. There's a move tutor here who teaches the fire, water, or grass type equivalents of Hyper Beam to only your starter Pokemon and only if its friendship is maxed out. This is one reason I played with Charmander for as long as I did, but it turns out Keyboard's friendship is not even maxed. It would be a little awkward at this point, using him a bit more just to max friendship and learn this move just to rebox him, so I won't bother, but I did try. Then, with all of this Detour, Cinnabar, Sevii, Delayed Evolution, Move Tutor nonsense out of the way, we can put the run back on the rails and take on the Silphco dungeon, where we of course massively outlevel the opponents. I know I'm going to get mad comments about playing the game so weird, but if this all seems upside down to you, just remember that I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the developers and understand why. Why did they make intentional changes to rebalance most of the types, yet completely snub bug type? And among the few possible bug move users, why is Dugong my best option? The fact that the Sealor trade comes so close to the move relearner does feel like quite a coincidence. Anyway, head in the game. I feel like my powerful team, still well below the obedience cap of 50 set by Erica's badge, is an argument for lowering that obedience cap to like 45. Players do not need to be this strong during Saffron City. And on that note, there's no reason Sabrina's badge should only increase the cap to 70, it may as well be infinity at that point. Silphco is a delightful dungeon for me. I always liked the teleporter mechanic and how it has a ton of floors, but each one is small. It reminds me of those single-screen Nintendo puzzle games like Adventures of Lolo. Sadly, there's no Earthquake TM in here because it was moved to be a prize in Viridian Gym. This makes sense for both theme and power level, but it does make me a little saltier yet that Psychic was still left where it was. Like, Sabrina could have awarded that. And because of the volume of loot I was picking up in here, I remembered how rough the item limit was in Gen 1. You can't tell me you got through Silphco in Red version without having to make a trip out to the PC to store items at least one time. This dungeon, especially because it's so loot heavy, is a much nicer experience this generation with the limitless backpack capacity. Cable dinged level 47 against a random grunt in here, which is a meaningful level because I happen to have 8 rare candies saved from my Meowth crew. So, I hand her the Everstone, pop 3 candies so she learns Outrage, remove the Everstone, and give her 5 more candies so she evolves into Dragonair, then Dragon Knight, and I teach her Fly to get that mobility back on the team, with altogether little interruption between my Charizard and Dragonite hours. I won't be using Cable in battles while the rest of the team now catches up, but we have a strong all-rounder in our pocket against the Elite Four and the powerful postgame. Rival Fight 6 takes place in here, and his levels are quickly catching up to ours, though we're still ahead. In fact, we're very quickly going to flip from being ahead in levels to being behind as we reach the end of the game and the postgame. Our strength has grown relatively stably, but enemy levels in this game are like a graph of tan X. After beating Rival, the Sylph employee gives us a Lapras as before. Fossil Pokemon levels were dropped to 5, making them much less usable, but Lapras was made much more usable in FireRed, coming now at level 25 up from 15. She's not far from slotting straight onto a team. In Gen 1, it felt to me like the Gift Lapras was the game's way to make sure that we both had a Surfer to reach Blaine and an Ice type to bring against Dragon Master Lance, and raising the level in FireRed makes Lapras feel even more that way. I definitely would have played her for those reasons if that slot was not taken by my Dugong shenanigans. Papa Giovanni's up on floor 11 once we have methodically exhausted every teleporter and grunt in the area. His highest level is still lower than our lowest. I'll admit, clearing all the Cinnabar content early and being overleveled for this has reduced the fun that I'm having in battles. But other fun has been gained in finding unique paths and beating Blaine at a lower level, so I'm at peace with my choice. And we really are going to need every point of experience that we've been getting. The Sylph President gifts us a Master Ball once we've rescued the company, which you'd probably want to save for a wandering legendary dog. And I never did the fighting dojo, so let's head there now. For some reason, held items by opponents are relatively scarce in this game. Leaders and Elite Four will have a berry on their ace, and ladies might have like a nugget on their Persians, but that's about it. Except for in here, where every single opponent holds a black belt. It's weird. I taught Thief to Mimian just for this place so that I could rob a black belt to give to Tim Socks. This dojo is a harsh reminder that physical and special moves are still locked to type, as Hitmonchan just doesn't do damage with his cute little elemental punches, even when we're weak to them. At this point, I'm holding nearly 400,000 in cash from amulet coining my way through the mid-game, so I take a trip to the game corner to get my team out. I grab Thunderbolt for Mimian to replace Thief now that we've stolen what we need, Flamethrower for Cable I have to move delete Surf for, and while I'm teaching moves, I realize that I should have given Wet Tomato, Sunny Day, and Solar Beam a while ago, so I do that now. Then, it's into Sabrina's gym to see if my over-engineered Signal Beam strategy has any legs. A lot of ghosts in here demand mime attention, but yeah. Signal Beam works as a psychic solution, and even has a fun attack animation. I always like that swirling helix effect. Signal Beam one-shots Sabrina's Kadabra and Mime. Then I got cheeky and brought in Tomato, who's weak to Psychic, just to test out her new combo against Alakazam. Sunny Day boosts her speed high enough to act before Alakazam's second turn, and Solar Beam no longer requiring the charge-up turn takes him down to 1 hit point while he foolishly Future Sights me, and despite Sabrina hyper-potioning, a second Solar Beam gets there from full. Sweet. Then, because I needed some window to talk about Moltres, I decided this was a good time to return to one island and complete Mount Ember. After several battles and a small dungeon, I was face to face with Moltres in its new home atop the mountain. This placement is a good change. In the originals, you could rush Zapdos and Articuno pretty early if you wanted to, while Moltres was locked definitively behind all 8 badges. It's still harder to reach than the other two, being gated by Blaine, but you can catch Moltres early enough for Sabrina and Giovanni if you so desire. Speaking of, let's head to the final gym. You know what the Sevii Islands improved about the Kanto experience? An issue I had in Gen 1, especially because I had cleared out the Sea Ruth before fighting Sabrina, is that the end of the game was back-to-back gym battles. Sabrina, Blaine, Giovanni, rival, Elite Four, game over. The Sevii Islands break up this endgame rush if you do the first 3 as they become available after Blaine. I don't know if the devs agreed with me that the pacing toward the end of the game was a little fast, or if the first 3 islands were offered more as an XP grinding area before the Elite Four, but they are well placed for both purposes. Anyway, Giovanni. Wet Tomato pulled ahead of the team here because I was having too much fun running no-charge solar beams off of Sunny Day. Y'all, I have not used solar beams since I was like 9 years old, tested it out once on Venusaur, learned that it takes 2 turns to fire, and went, ew, so this is healing something in me. Giovanni only has Rhyhorns in this game, no Rhydon, and I guess that was done so that we'd feel a sense of shock when we encounter rivals Rhydon. This is a change I don't support. Giovanni definitely should have a Rhydon. He finally awards the missing Earthquake TM once we win, which goes straight on Nina. Then, since the Elite Four is coming and I had spare cash, I returned to the game corner and spent 50k apiece on the water, grass, and fire held items before taking Route 22 for our 7th rival fight. His levels have finally caught mine, with his champion Blastoise at 53, several levels higher than my party's 48-ish. No other notes. Route 23, that weird liminal walk up to Victory Road, has some fun hidden items to hunt for, same as Gen 1. Then Victory Road itself is almost identical to Gen 1, minus Moltres, and the Sky Attack TM is now Dragon Claw, one that's equally hard to make good use of. As we fight our way to the Indigo Plateau, it is tradition to give the team a report card based on their performance so far. Nina was crazy strong early on thanks to Body Slam and Dig, then tapered off as we moved past electric opponents, and even Earthquake doesn't bring her back much due to lack of targets. She's mostly just hitting neutral earthquakes from here on out, and may as well be a big, dumb, normal-type attacker like Snorlax or Kangaskhan. Mimian has been consistently fine the whole game, eating up the poison opponents that Nina can't touch, but his Thunderbolts aren't quite enough to one-shot most water foes. Light Screen has gone mostly unused, but I do have a nagging feeling that he might save the team with it at some point. Wet Tomato has been an absolute beast, and I'm sure that my grade is biased simply by how much better Gloom is compared to Gen 1. Her surprising bulk lets her live even through super effective moves, and Sunny Day always brings her speed high enough to counterattack with lethal solar beams, even in neutral matchups, so her narrow type coverage actually hasn't been much of an issue. Still, some points off for only having the one trick. Sealor is a lot worse than I feared, and I'm worried about the dragon slaying that we need him to do as our resident ice type. Yes, he has some bulk, but with his low special attack, he's not one-shotting anything, and his low attack means he's not even one-shotting many psychic foes with the signal beam that we worked so hard for. He is versatile, but not great at any one thing, and you're not rewarded for that in Pokemon. Tim Socks I have not brought up recently because he's been silently carrying the team this whole time. Aerial Ace dropped off a little in the late game, but he's still one-shotting everything I bring him in to Brick Break or Rock Slide. And Cable we haven't gotten to battle with, but the Elite Four will finally be her time. With attack much higher than special attack, she's more interested in flying than outrage. I didn't pick moves that gave her great coverage, but it will be interesting to stack her up against Lance's dragons. And with that, we're at the Indigo Plateau. After blowing my cash on a load of vitamins from Celadon and a handful of restorative items, it's time to take on the Elite Four, starting with the Ice Master Lorelei. Mimian is not afraid of some neutral ice beams from her Dugong, so I blow a turn setting up Light Screen, thinking it might save a teammate later before spending 2 Thunderbolts to down Dugong, who started some annoying hail. Lapras is next, and I risk a cheeky tomato under the cover of a Light Screen. Sunny Day ends the hail, and Solar Beam takes her low enough before Giga Drain finishes the job, all the while tanking Ice Beams. I simply leave Tomato out to nuke Slowbro in 1 Solar Beam. Her Jinx is 4th, and this one is a real problem with its crazy speed and offense. Luckily, Tim has good speed too, and he one-shots her using Rock Slide, but this thing is so powerful you need to outspeed her. I'm scared of this one in the coming rematch. Lorelei's final Pokemon is Cloyster, safe for Tomato because it doesn't even know an offensive ice move. I don't even need to reapply Sunlight because Giga Drain is enough to take me home in 1. Bruno's our next opponent, and Tomato continues her rampage. Earthquakes from Onyx only tickle me, giving the time I need to set up Sun, then heal up and win on a Giga Drain. Tomato would have been fine to stay in against Hitmonchan, but Nina did need something to do during the Elite Four, so I allow her to take this one with a couple of neutral Earthquakes. Onyx 2 goes back to Tomato for beaming, then I give his Ace Machamp to Nina, who defends his moves quite well. Finally, I serve Hitmonlee to Timsox, who wins in 3 Aerial Aces through a full restore. That is Bruno handled quite cleanly thanks to some excellent Gloom offense and Nidoqueen defense. Agatha is a little scary to me. Her levitating Gengar is only going to be weak to Mimian, but it knows Shadow Punch, so if I fail to one-shot, I'll be in a lot of trouble. Luckily we act first and we do get there. I foolishly sent in Timsox against Golbat, who loses thanks to Air Cutter, and Mimian has to finish the job with Thunderbolt. Arbok is the only real target for Nina in the whole Elite Four, and it still needs 2 Earthquakes to beat. I really would have done better with a returning Kangaskhan in this slot. I had teched against Agatha's Hypnosis-loving Haunter by giving Sealor a Chesto Berry, since I know he's not one-shotting anything anyway, and indeed, Berry heals a Hypnosis and Sealor gets there in 2 Ice Beams against Haunter. Then her final scary Gengar outspeeds Mimian, but I get very lucky that she misses the Hypnosis. This catches Agatha in a Restore loop while I just spam Psychics until winning. Revive Timsox from my Golbat greediness, and it's on to Lance. This fight opens disappointingly when Mimian fails to one-shot his Gyarados, even with a 400% effective Thunderbolt. Lance blows a full restore, and I get there in 2 more bolts, but mine was supposed to make it through Gyarados unscathed, and is now hurt. His super fast Hyper Beaming Aerodactyl ends mine before he can fire a bolt, but the recharge turn allows Sealor to take a risk-free Ice Beam, and I luck into the freeze for a 2-shot. Next, against the Dragonair, I test out Dragon-powered Wet Tomato and actually took him down to a sliver before losing, and Timsox gets to bring me home. Dragonite, after that, wasted a turn safeguarding so that Sealor could Ice Beam and tragically miss the one-shot, but I do survive a crit from Outrage to get him next turn. Finally, his second Dragonair I beat with 2 Brick Breaks from Tim, shrugging off Outrages since Dragonair does not have very good special attack. Then with Lance defeated, only Algo remains. He awkwardly says, "Hey Mothy, I was looking forward to seeing you, Mothy," in 2 lines of dialogue, just so that when we rematch him later, they can lazily swap out one of those lines to mention seeing me again. Rivals Fight is much more fun than the rest of the Elite Four because he's not bound to one type, meaning that more than 1 or 2 Pokemon on our team make sense to utilize. Of course, it takes 2 Ice Beams for Sealor to beat his Pidgeot. Next comes Rhydon, who gives Tomato enough slack to set up Sun and heal nigh full on a Giga Drain. Even in the sunlight, Alakazam is faster than Wet Tomato, but all he does is Future Sight twice, allowing me to win in 2 Solar Beams. Okay. The sunlight comes back to hurt me though, as he sends in Arcanine next. I debut Cable to resist his powered up fire attacks and foolishly use Outrage when I should have flown to better waste Sunshine turns and recover more leftovers HP in the air, not to mention do more damage. Experience using your Pokemon matters, folks. This could have been avoided if I had brought Cable out ever before this. Nina has to come in and cover for my mistake. For Blastoise, of course, Tomato is back out, who hilariously countered his Rain Dance with an immediate Sunny Day, then got to turn around and beam him off the speed boost. He gets in 1 Hydro Pump, but I reapply Sun and Giga Drain him to win. Algo's final Pokemon is Exeggutor, who takes an annoying amount of Aerial Aces from Timsox to defeat through multiple full restores. He eventually lands an Egg Bomb to wipe out Tim, so it's ultimately Sealor who comes out to finish things. And that is the Elite Four complete. Red, blue, and yellow versions end the game here. After entering into the Hall of Fame, the game saves and they deposit you in Pallet Town, able to visit Cerulean Cave for Mewtwo, but besides that, there's no new content. Well, I mean, you can get a Doug Trio in yellow, but... In Fire Red, we get to play the remaining 4 Sevii Islands in a mini quest chain before we're ultimately allowed to re-challenge the Elite Four, who will have very strong upgraded teams. Professor Oak upgrades our Pokédex and grants access to the latter Sevii Islands only if we've caught 60 Pokemon, which we actually have. After hustling to 50 for the XP share, 14 more have just kind of happened since then, and we get it with a comfortable 64 in the dex. Now, I've been relatively brief with plot events until now because they were beat-for-beat replays of Red and Blue, but the Sevii Island plot is new, so I'm going to follow events a little more slowly here. We kick off the post-game plot by speaking to Celio again on one island. He wants us to find a ruby to upgrade his big computer. Head up to Mount Ember where we fought Moltres, and some rocket grunts give away half of a password, then need defeating. And inside the tunnel they were guarding is... what's this? Slugma is the first non-Kanto Pokemon we encounter on the whole run. From here on out, a large chunk of Generation 2 Pokemon can be encountered and caught. Their levels are too low to bring into the team without extreme grinding effort, so we won't make any post-game roster changes this time. Well, except one, kind of. At the bottom of this tunnel is a bunch of Braille. They really loved this mechanic in Gen 3, and the Ruby for Celio. Turn that in, and it turns out Celio needs a second gem, which is, of course, a Sapphire. That action continues on 4 Island, but I have personal business drawing me to 6 first. Partway south toward Ruin Valley, we can strength some rocks aside to acquire a Sunstone. This stone is given to us in both Fire Red and Leaf Green versions, but it's only usable in Fire Red because Leaf Green has no Sunstone evolution Pokemon in it, while Fire Red has Gloom. So it is, no joke, this post-game Sunstone more than any other factor that caused me to decide Fire Red is the better version of this video game. It is super weird to be given an Evo Stone with no usable targets in the game, right? If you're a returning viewer who pays careful attention, you know I have a policy against running duplicate types on my team, a policy which was being broken while Nidoqueen and Gloom were both repping Poison. I tolerated that for this reason. Blossom loses the poison typing and otherwise just boosts the stats of our darling grass champion, Wet Tomato. When we enter the Poké Center on 6 Island, Algo finds us in good spirits. He basically concedes there's too many dang Pokemon nowadays and stops trying to catch them, which is wild considering how aggressive he was with that during the main game. He's like, yeah, Gen 1 and 2 is enough for me, you kids have fun. Okay, let's get stuff done on 4 Island. Here is a daycare. Finally, we're allowed to breed Pokemon, which had been a core mechanic in Johto and Hoenn by the late early game. By introducing breeding to Kanto, we finally have a way to obtain Lickitung, Jynx, and Farfetch'd without their unchangeable NPC nicknames. And one house here holds a braggadocious man who adds stars to our trainer card for hatching a bunch of eggs or beating the Elite Four many times. He gave us 1 already for our first Elite Four win. Like the Fame Checker, there's no extrinsic reason to work on this, but who doesn't love a little extra completionism once in a while? Lorelei of the Elite Four lives here, but she's not at home. We find her in the Icefall Cave on this island up a waterfall that they give the HM waterfall for right here in the same cave. It feels like a dick move to force us to waste a move slot like that just to use it once right here. In the back of the cave, help Lorelei defeat some rocket grunts who are here to poach Pokemon. This then liberates her to return to Indigo Plateau for later. Then I spent a while surfing here to demonstrate something cool. Lapras is actually catchable in the wild here at 1%. I love that they finally added a source for this Pokemon who was previously rare to the point of uniqueness in Kanto. It does have me wondering though, what about Eevee, Lickitung, Jynx, and Farfetch'd, and kind of Snorlax? I would have loved to finally get sources for those guys too. Anyway, head to 6 Island, probably the largest besides 1 naturally speaking. There's a lot of fighting to do up the water path where a woman asks to see large Heracrosses. Yeah, that quest to repeatedly catch one species of Pokemon for terrible prizes is back, but this time it's a better implementation because the first one we bring her can be any size. The pattern bush just next door has many trainers to fight, and we can grab a Heracross right here for the woman at a merciful 20%. Emerald version really traumatized me with the low catch rates on all of the content Pokemon. For showing woman Heracross, we get 1 Nest Ball. Yeah, we're not repeating this quest. Then, all the way south on 6 Island, past where we got the Sunstone, some Braille tells us to use Cut on this door to access the dotted hole home to the Sapphire that Celio desires. This cave is a puzzle, having to drop in the correct hole several times in the right order. At the bottom is the Sapphire Celio needs, but just before we can grab it, some guy named Gideon ninjas it from under our nose. But he leaves us with the second half of the rocket password. I think he wants to get caught. So let's go get our gem back. On 5 Island, the now complete password gains us access to the Rocket Warehouse, which has some spinny floors, as Rocket Dungeons do. This dungeon actually brings back the female Rocket Grunts from Gen 2. So they are in the game data, but Game Freak was just bizarrely insistent on not changing history with any of the Game Corner or Silphco grunt genders. There's a Sludge Bomb TM in here, way too late to care, but I stick it on Nina anyway. Then the 2 rocket admins we fight in here actually seem to be the same ones we fight in the Goldenrod Radio Tower in Gen 2. The female admin has her hallmark Vileplume, and the male has Houndoom. Male admin pledges to find Giovanni and revive Team Rocket, which closes the loop on what happens to Team Rocket between these games and Gen 2. I do love that they added some continuity here to reward people who stuck with the series since Gold and Silver. Then, for some reason, Gideon turns out to be a tough trainer as well. He was here trying to sell Team Rocket our Sapphire, and we have to defeat his team of electric Pokemon to get it back. And that is most of the plot handled in the postgame. Everything else is just a loose collection of stuff to do and see. Like, we can visit this dead Onyx on Memorial Pillar Island, I think he is the Memorial Pillar, and place that lemonade that I had us purchase ages ago to receive a Facade TM. And surfing north on 5 Island, we hit Resort Gorgeous, where, among other opponents, are 2 ladies holding $10,000 apiece, worth doubling to 20k with your amulet coin. Lost Cave, just east of the resort, is another directional puzzle dungeon where if we exit in the correct direction several times in a row, we collect some nice loot and ultimately find a rude woman named Selfie who battles us. Her 2 Persians hold nuggets, and she is also worth 20k doubled if you at all care about money at this point. We then warp out to escort her home, but if you revisit the same room she was in again, it holds a silk scarf. The normal boosting held item you can collect in the first 60 minutes playing Gold and Silver comes near the tail end of the post-game in FireRed. Cool. There's an old man on an island west of the resort who hands us a Togepi egg. I kept this around to hatch just because I don't like putting eggs in the PC, but the placement of this is just so weird. Then I turn in the Sapphire to Celio, who finally fixes the rest of the internet and allows us to now trade later gen Pokemon with Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald cartridges. It felt a little off to me that we're offered a chunk of Generation 2 Pokemon in the FireRed postgame, but not a single Gen 3 Pokemon. I do get why, those have their own games that Game Freak still wants people to buy, but come on, not even one? And we still haven't touched 7 Island. The most prominent feature here is the Battle Tower that behaves much like the Trainer Hill that opens on Route 111 in the Emerald postgame. I gave this one a quick try and did win a few battles, but I didn't bother wasting heals and allowed myself to lose quickly because the prizes are just trade evolution items that I cannot use. Going southward on 7, we battle quite a few strong and diverse trainers, feeling like Victory Road until we reach the Tanobi Key. Everything on the Sevii Islands is named rather creatively, and I like it. The Key is a one-room dungeon with a push puzzle that opens up some dumb unknown chambers a little farther south. And the grass around here contains larvatars if you're feeling particularly adventurous. Bum around those unknown chambers if you want to, and that is the last of the Sevii Island content. It's such a weird smattering of game mechanics they wanted to pretend don't exist in Kanto, yet had to include somewhere, a few tiny plot elements and quests, and a few dozen carefully selected Johto Pokemon. Also, returning the Sapphire unleashed Suicune in our world as a wandering encounter, but I would just kill it if I saw it, so I'm not gonna look. I did want to check on Cerulean Cave, though. It's arranged much the same as in Gen 1, except Wobbuffets are now in the encounter table, and they will kill you with Destiny Bond, so bring several revives while you explore here. Level 70 Mewtwo awaits you on the bottom floor. I just had Mimian blasted away with Thunderbolts. Then I spent a while grinding here for experience until the team all reached level 62. Because the Elite Four can be challenged again, having completed the Sevii Island story, and they are tough. The rival rematch is easily as hard as Red from Gen 2, and the rest each have a couple of very problematic Pokemon. So despite being ahead in levels most of the game, we're now far below a safe level to fight the Elite Four rematch, and need to spend a good 90 minutes in Cerulean Cave grinding. You could argue it's a bad level curve, but I do still prefer it this way. The final challenge should be an actual challenge. Now, I don't feel that it's valuable to give a play-by-play this time, but I will point out big differences. Like that Lorelei's Dugong actually picked up Signal Beam this time, which is hilarious, and her Jinx learned Psychic, so it is now risky to fight with Primeape. The biggest change, though, is that each trainer has Gen 2 Pokemon in their lineups now. It's as though none of them had Sevii Island access either until we got access and then they just tagged along. Bruno's Onisies became Steelacees, and his Machamp gained Earthquake, making it unsafe to battle using Nina this time. Agatha evolved her Haunter and Golbat, plus now has a Miss Drevis, who's not particularly strong, but she kind of had to, considering it's the only other ghost type across the 2 generations. I used Cable extensively for this Agatha rematch. Lance already had a team with crazy stats and type coverage. His big trick is adding a Kingdra, notorious in my Gen 2 video for having effectively no weaknesses. But this time, we brought a dragon. I got lucky he wasted a turn dragon dancing before Hyper Beam, giving me the 2 turns I needed for Cable to outrage him. Really, Lance's biggest issue this time was Aerodactyl. It's the one time I had to use a battle full restore because I needed a healthy Mimian to handle things. When we reach Rival, he just says, "Hey Mothy, you came back, Mothy." They put very little effort into differentiating the Elite Four dialogues for our return. I feel like he should have had some dramatic "I've been training constantly and seeking out new, stronger Pokemon since our last battle" kind of speech. Alas, Rival's Gen 2 Pokemon are a Heracross and a Tyranitar. Neither tough to beat thanks to 4X weaknesses, but Tyranitar started a really annoying permanent sandstorm that ended up hurting his team as much as mine. Rival used, I think, 5 full restores during our fight, and the winning play went to Nina, earthquaking down his Arcanine after getting almost no use at all in the rest of the Elite Four. And that is the end of Pokemon FireRed version. Okay, brass tacks. What's better and what's worse? Or maybe more interesting to ask, what was in need of improvement for Gen 1 that didn't get it? Well, the hugely expanded movesets on all Pokemon is definitely good, but a lot of new moves come at bizarrely high levels, like Kabutops getting Ancient Power at level 65? A lot of Pokemon got new moves at the top end, where I believe what they actually needed to fix their learn sets were weaker same-type moves back in the 20s. But there is one issue related to expanded movesets that I called out in my Ruby video. With more Pokemon getting strong moves and diverse type coverage, the meta is much more aggressive this time. It's very rare to have a Pokemon who resists your opponent's whole moveset, so we've lost the ability to defensively counter opponents. This one is just a matter of opinion, so I won't count it as a negative to the game, but I actually had a more fun time playing with the janked up movesets in Yellow version when the game was less about killing them before they kill you. I imagine that trend is only going to continue in the franchise as power creep gives stronger moves sooner, but there really was something special about the Gen 1, and for the most part Gen 2 combat, thanks to the more limited movesets. What about the Sevii Islands? They sure existed. I did like very much how getting to do the first 3 islands after Blaine split up the endgame, which was previously a race to the finish. I didn't like how awkward they were. They're extremely population dense compared to the rest of the world, and it's such a weird mishmash of content. Did we really need multiple unknown chambers, and a Heracross catching quest, and a gold miner who opens a tunnel to Dunsparces? Did we need Rock Smash and Waterfall HMs just to only use them once or twice within the islands themselves and nowhere else? I mean, the stuff was fun, the pacing just didn't feel great with all of it jumbled together. The devs were so careful to make the mainland Kanto experience feel almost exactly the same as Gen 1, so they shoved any content that could threaten that sameness into the Sevii Islands. I think it would have felt better if that content was integrated into Kanto, but breeding in the Route 5 daycare, make us use Waterfall to get Articuno. Heck, the Heracross quest could have asked for Ghastlies instead and come in Lavender Town. Lavender Town is pretty empty. I could think of 2 reasons why they designed the Sevii Island this way. On one hand, they just really wanted Kanto to be the exact same as it was before. It was an artistic choice to omit any new content from Kanto proper. And on the other hand, maybe they were lazy. It's way easier to stick your new content in a new place than to tweak something that exists. Ask any programmer. I'll assume the actual reason landed somewhere in the middle and move on, but overall, the Sevii Island experience is like, fine. It felt more like a compatibility patch to interface with Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and then it felt like proper content. Related to insisting that Kanto doesn't change at all, I know I've beat this dead horse, but they really could have made fishing better with an earlier good rod. Let the people use Poliwag or Goldeen, come on. Double battles were a really strange inclusion because they violated their no changes directive and weren't even implemented in a fun way. There were very few of them, none of them were tough, and they all ended too soon because the opponents only brought 1 Pokemon. I love well-done double battles, but this whole feature could have been axed in FireRed and LeafGreen with no loss in quality. What about other stuff that was good? Well, the NPC trades were very good. I know they're just the same ones from Red and Blue, but still, adding held items, natures, and abilities actually gave more personality to these trades, and I liked seeing what they chose for each Pokemon. But I think by far the best thing about FireRed and LeafGreen is how they actually make you catch Pokemon as part of the core gameplay in order to access the postgame. I was keeping up with the gifts from Professor Oak's aids as I went, and they added more aids to help remind us to stay on track. I found myself competing with our rival and actually took it personally when he bragged about catching a bunch of Pokemon, since I was trying my best too. And the Safari Zone was way more fun than ever since I had a reason to throw balls and bother making a bunch of catches. Force catching isn't something I want to see in every game, because it would get old fast. But this is the first Pokemon game ever that has adequately incentivized actually catching a bunch of the things throughout the game, and I had a lot of fun doing so. So, are FireRed and LeafGreen better games than Pokemon Red and Blue? Well, that's a dumb question to ask. All we should do is keep in mind the short list of reasons we might miss the original games if we were to only play these. For me, that's the atmosphere, especially in the creepier places like Lavender Town and the Team Rocket dungeons. The jankier movesets can be a different kind of fun to play with, and if you missed the Jesse and James content from the yellow version. Thanks so much for watching my video. I know I played this one a little weirder than the others, but that's partially because this was a remake, which made me really drill down on differences from the previous games. I was really excited to test out new bug moves and raise a Dragonite for the first time ever, and it turns out you gotta play the games kinda strange if you want those aspects on your team. These Pokemon videos are a huge amount of work to make, so I would very much appreciate a like and a comment if you had a good time here. If you loved the Sevii Islands and I'm just not seeing it, help me understand. Thanks so much to my patrons who keep my channel afloat without needing to rely so much on ad revenue. Y'all make a huge difference and I'm very grateful. We've got a friendly community Discord and I stream once a week if you want to say hi between uploads. Social links are attached. And stay tuned for more entries in this series. As much as I want to cover Heart Gold, we'll most likely be taking a trip to Sinnoh next. Until then, see you later, alligator.